real pain in the neck. So we are going to be looking for the light today through the idea of nurturing your body, mind, and spirit. And most of you already know me and you've been coming to these before, but just in case anybody is new, just want to really quickly let you know a little bit about who I am. I got my certification in life coaching from UC Davis about 6 years ago. And then I started my own practice. I have been working with individual clients and teaching for a number of years. That's partly how I know a number of you who are on here today. And at some point then, about 1.5 years ago, I started working with St. Mary's College in Notre Dame, Indiana, to help them develop initiatives to help their students better manage their stress and anxiety. So this is something that I have been working on for myself for the better part of 11 years now, because I have anxiety. I developed it about 11 years ago. And this year, past year, I should say, wow, that's nice to be able to say that, this past year, I've struggled with my anxiety more in a very long time. It's been probably 7 years as bad as it has been this year. And so it is a constant reminder to me that I am always needing to, nurture my body, mind, and spirit as I remind myself of all these things I'm about to talk to you. Like, these are all things I live them on a regular basis. And so if you ever have any questions or want to know more about me, you can always visit my website. And I would encourage you to follow me on Instagram if you are on Instagram, because I just love seeing other people's views of the world, especially if I know you. So yeah, definitely please follow me there. So today's workshop objectives, the things we really want to focus on today, first and foremost, again, is that importance of nurturing your whole self. And we are going to talk about what that means. And then also, we're going to talk quite a bit about the relationship between stress and anxiety and your body. And then we are going to touch on some new ways. For some people, this may not be quite new. Hopefully, it might even just reinforce things you already know. But for those of you who maybe haven't kept up with a lot of the latest research on stress and anxiety, this could be some really revolutionary ways to shift your perspective of your body, your mind, and your spirit. And so we're going to talk about not only managing your stress and anxiety, but we are going to actually talk about how you can reduce your stress and your anxiety. And there is a difference between managing it and reducing it, for sure. So the Wholeness Framework is something that I developed for St. Mary's College. And as I mentioned last week, we were really dealing with the yellow section down there of cultivating emotion, or I should say last month and the month before that. Cultivating emotional resilience was the thing that we were really focusing on. And so today we're going to be shifting to a new section. And today we're going to be addressing that green area there that's about the body, mind, and spirit. So really figuring out how to nurture that whole self. And so I want to be very clear when I say body, mind, and spirit and whole self. I appreciate that there may be people who are joining us today who are atheist or agnostic. There may be people who are very religious. It's all good. I want to make sure that this concept of spirit is accessible to everybody, not just people who identify as religious or spiritual, because it is a factor for everyone. And I think a part of what causes so much stress and anxiety in our world today is that we have really compartmentalized this idea of spirit to be something that is only the domain of people who are religious or for people who believe in something. And I think that is very much not just the domain of, of those two categories. I think spirit is really something we need to bring back into the picture for everyone. And so that's why I really want to make sure I clarify what I mean by whole person. Body is something we're all very familiar with. We all have one. We think of when I say body, I really mean like your nervous system, which your brain is actually a part of your nervous system. We're going to touch on that here in a minute. And then also your 5 senses. So touch, smell, your sense of hearing, sight. I'm going to forget, I can't remember all five, but you know what I'm talking about. So that's your body. Right. And then mind, we're also very familiar with. Oh boy, we have lots of thoughts and emotions all the time. And so when I say mind, I'm talking about your consciousness, your awareness that you are the person in this body, like that is that sense of consciousness. And then the cognition piece where you have all these thoughts about things, and then the feelings that you have, these are all pieces that we're all very familiar with. And then finally bringing in that third piece, spirit. And if this is something that you are very familiar with and comfortable with, then I don't need to really go into a lot of explanation in that case. But for those of you who may be atheist or agnostic and not really sure what to make about this whole idea of spirit, I want you to just know that the human body is hardwired for experiencing awe and wonder. This is something that the Greater Good Science Center at UC Berkeley has done a lot of really interesting research on, the science of spirituality. And they have actually shown that experiences that trigger awe and wonder have a biological effect on the body. They actually reduce stress in the body. And so this is a really important thing. And another piece of spirit is this idea of self-transcendence. Anytime you can get out of your own head and feel a stronger connection to the world or to other people, this is actually a type of spiritual experience, this transcending of the self. And so again, there is science behind this. And we all know too that connection is such an important thing. During the pandemic, we've all felt that sense of disconnection. And a lot of times when we are struggling with our own mental health, one of the best suggestions I've ever gotten was to get out of my own head and focusing on myself, and to turn that outward and start to focus on other people and how I can help other people in the world or do things. That can be a really great way to transcend the self and help nurture my full self, right? Not just my mind, not just my body, but really that spiritual component. And so awe and wonder are something that we can experience at times. So I wanted to share this picture because, well, first that's me in the green jacket, but I used to live here. And not only live here, if you look directly across the valley to the base of the mountains, pretty much right from Grand Teton, this is Grand Teton National Park. If you come down from the base of the highest peak, I used to live in a log cabin at the base of that mountain range for a year and a half. That was my view out my front door every time I walked out the door, okay? And I'm from Indiana. So those of you who are on the workshop today from, the flatlands, this is like awe and wonder every day. But what I realized after living there so I lived in that cabin for a year and a half, but I lived in the valley in total for about 4.5 years. And what I realized after about the third year was that at some point it starts to become normal. Like, this is just your view. It was not unusual for me to see 12, 15, 20 moose on the way to and from work, certain times of the year. And it just became kind of my norm. And that was something where I realized I was like, I really need to work on finding awe and wonder again, because I can't get used to this. If I get used to this, then what is that going to do to my, I really need to have that sense of awe and wonder. And so when I figured out how to do that, but I wasn't really tested until I came back to Indiana to be able to realize, how am I doing with that? And so I now know that I can find awe and wonder anywhere. And I have made that my mindfulness practice. And for those of you who've seen the photos that I post like on Instagram, this is really something that I have had to, it's a skill that I've had to work at. And now that I'm able to do it, I can see it everywhere. We always think of awe and wonder as these really grand things, big, big views, big experiences. But awe and wonder can happen with even the tiniest of things. Really, what it is about getting your brain out of its rut and seeing the world in a new way. And so awe and wonder are just so important. And they are going to play a part in pretty much everything we talk about today, because we are going to talk about the human body in some ways that I hope will trigger awe and wonder when you realize just what's going on inside of you. You know, we have this body, but we don't come with an owner's manual. And I have a science background, but it's all meteorology, geology. I tell people I only do dead stuff. I don't never alive or dead for a really long time. Like my sister's the wildlife biologist. So I didn't know anything about really the body or the nervous system when I developed anxiety. And that was really a significant gap that needed to be filled. And I accidentally came across the information that I needed. It wasn't like I found a book or a doctor or something. I just kind of stumbled on this information one day. And I realized how important it was for me to understand what was going on inside my body. And so that's where we're going to start today with this nurturing yourself. We are going to get a better understanding of the nervous system. And so I don't want to go into detail because, again, like I said, I don't do living things. I only talk about I only get excited about the weather. So but we do need to do a basic overview. So don't get too nervous here. When I say nervous system, we're talking about two main parts: the central nervous system, which is your brain and your spinal cord, and then your peripheral nervous system, which is all the nerves that come off of your spinal cord and they go to all your extremities. And so those are the two main parts of your nervous system. And then we aren't going to worry about the central nervous system. We're going to talk about the peripheral. And we're not going to talk about the whole peripheral nervous system either. We're only going to talk about one part, which is the autonomic. And that's the part that operates on its own. So like your heart is beating right now and you're breathing and you don't have to think about it. It just happens. That's the autonomic nervous system doing that work for your body. So we're going to talk about that part of your nervous system because that's where the experience of stress and anxiety is most acutely felt and also generated. So when you have a panic attack or you have the feelings of anxiety or stress, they are coming from this autonomic nervous system. And there are two parts to it: the parasympathetic and the sympathetic. And so that's what we're going to talk a little bit more in detail about now. And so for those of you who have done even just a very basic overview of like stress and anxiety, you've probably heard of the sympathetic nervous system because it's called fight, flight, or freeze. And so this is something we hear about, you know, your heart beats faster, your passageways in your lungs dilate, and, you know, so they can take in more oxygen. Other bodily processes actually shut down. So digestion will shut down. You know, you may be familiar with like animals like a gazelle that may be in labor on the plains in Africa. If a lion comes out of nowhere and starts chasing that gazelle, the sympathetic nervous system will shut down labor. It will actually stop it so that the gazelle can escape and get away to someplace that's safe. So, you know, there are some pretty intense things that happen in the sympathetic nervous system that really affect your body's ability to survive. And that's why when you have a panic attack, it feels so existentially terrifying, is because the sympathetic nervous system is designed to respond to those existential threats. And so it's a very, you know, adrenaline is one of the main chemicals that the body releases. And so it's a real rush when you have this feeling that kicks in. What we are not told, and what we need to understand, especially if you have stress, like difficulty managing stress, or if you have anxiety, is that the sympathetic nervous system has a counterpart, and that's called the parasympathetic nervous system. And so everything that you see on this table has, in the sympathetic side, has a mirror opposite on the parasympathetic side. So just like your body can go into fight, flight, or freeze, your body also needs to rest and digest and reproduce. These are all things that happen and are controlled by the parasympathetic nervous system. This is what slows your heartbeat down. When you exhale, your breathing passages close up again. It's the parasympathetic nervous system that makes those passageways close up. It facilitates body processes, and it also releases chemicals in your body. And how many of you have ever heard of acetylcholine, right? It's like, it's not anything that anybody ever hears much about. And so I think it's just so important for us to understand that it is not enough to just know what's happening when you have anxiety. It is really important to know how to counterbalance that adrenaline when it gets released into your body. And so that's what we're going to be touching on with a few important things, because the parasympathetic nervous system actually helps you counterbalance your stress. And if you can harness it, if you can engage it to be able to do that, you will feel very noticeable physical differences in your body. And so when I say stress, I just want to make sure everybody understands there are certain stressors that are unavoidable. You may be a parent. You may have a really stressful job. You may have been born into poverty. You may have been born with some kind of genetic condition that affects your life. These are all things that are external stressors that we don't really have a lot of control over. Granted, you can quit your job and find another one, but that's going to generate a whole bunch of other external stresses. So, external stress is all really a part of life. And especially as we get older and we, become adults, we realize there really is no getting rid of a lot of the stress that we experience. There are internal stressors, though, that we also have that we can have a little bit more control over. So the emotions that we feel, like worry and guilt and fear, and then our thoughts and our perspectives and our beliefs that maybe generate those fears and generate that guilt and those worries, these are things we have control over. And that's why I talked the past 2 months about this idea of building emotional resilience. That's really what you can do to address those stressors. So we are not really going to focus on the internal stress today. We're really talking about the external stress, the stuff that we can't control, like a global pandemic, right? So when you are experiencing stress that is beyond your control and you want to find a way to feel better in the moment, these are triage techniques that you can do to calm yourself down. So if you are on the verge of having a panic attack, doing these things can help keep your anxiety under a little bit better control. If you're on the verge of feeling anxiety, this can actually keep you from getting to that point. And if you're having a hard time managing your stress, this can help with that as well. There are some very basic things. Deep breathing is recommended, not just because it takes your mind off of things, but because it actually engages your parasympathetic nervous system. And so the best thing you can do when you deep breathe is exhale for as long as you can. Really wring out your lungs and get all that air out, because it's on that exhale that your parasympathetic nervous system kicks in. And another way that you can get it to kick in is by tightening your muscles, which engages your sympathetic nervous system. But then when you relax the muscles, your parasympathetic nervous system has to kick in. So these are just, again, these are ways that you can consciously trigger that automatic side of yourself, that rest and digest functions in your body. You can trigger them to kick in. If you yawn, this actually triggers your parasympathetic nervous system, and I don't know why, but it does. So we are told about meditation, mindfulness, yoga, Tai Chi, all of these types of activities that I really wish Mary were able to be on today. She teaches Tai Chi. I don't know hardly anything about it, but we're told about these things, and we're not told the biological benefits. You might hear them if you get a really good teacher who's aware of them and can talk about them. But every one of these, meditation, mindfulness, yoga, Tai Chi, they all harness breathing, and they make your breath deeper and slower, and they harness your muscles, and they encourage you to relax. And so these are all ways to engage your parasympathetic nervous system. And what we're going to talk about today, though, is that this isn't just going to be a workshop on how to do mindfulness the traditional way. Another way that you can engage your parasympathetic nervous system is by doing the dishes, or sweeping the floors, or shoveling the walkway. Really, any chore that you do can be a way to engage your parasympathetic nervous system when you have that perspective of being more present, being more aware, breathing, feeling your muscles in your body, not being in the future and worrying, not being in the past and, regretting things or feeling guilty about things. Really just being here and now is a great way for you to have that biological relaxation by engaging your parasympathetic. And just to get us kind of a springboard into the rest of what we're going to be talking about today, Zen Buddhists have a wonderful saying that has just really changed the way that I look at my life and look at the world. And that is, before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. There is no difference. It's not like once you become more enlightened, you levitate and you never have to wash dishes again, right? Like there will always be dishes. There will always be stressors, external stressors. And it's just the way that you approach them that changes. And so with that in mind, we're going to talk about how do you shift your perspective. It can be as simple as just knowing, oh, if I look at dishes as a mindfulness practice, it becomes a mindfulness practice. But the brain is so much more complex than that and so much more fascinating. And this is the awe and wonder part. All right. This is where I want to hopefully really help you get this sense of like, wow, there is so much going on in our bodies and our minds that we just don't even realize. The placebo effect is something that you've maybe heard of. It's and it's certainly acknowledged in research studies. Whenever they test a new drug, they always have a placebo group that gets a sugar pill or some kind of inert medication to test to see if it helps the person, if it helps people, if the actual drug helps more than the placebo. That's the goal, right? And so we have very much underestimated the impacts of the placebo effect. This is not just something that happens when we take medicine. All right. There are so many ways that this can impact us. So just to give you some highlights, this slide here, I'll send you the PDF of this presentation so you can have these. If you want to go down the rabbit hole, more power to you. But I'm just going to give you a really brief overview of a couple of the ways that the placebo effect, we now understand the way that it affects your body. So there's been research that has been done where they have given people basically a sham knee surgery. Okay. They have gone through the whole process of putting the person under, giving them incisions, the whole 9 yards. But the only difference is one group actually got the, I forget what it's called, arterial something. It's like where they go into your knee and they kind of clean out the cartilage or whatever. The one group got the actual surgery and the other group, they didn't go in and do anything. They just did this, incisions. And so the people didn't know whether they actually got the surgery or not. And 3/4 of the people who did not get the surgery, the actual surgery, felt as improved pain-wise as the group that actually got the surgery. Okay. So this is just how profound we are talking about when we say that the placebo effect can affect the body. There are studies out there that show that if you have people mentally lift weights, just mentally lift weights, they can see a 15% increase in their strength of their muscles. All right. And there are a lot of other strength training ones and athletic performance related studies that have been out there that show all kinds of ways that the placebo effect can improve performance. There is a really interesting study. There's an article on NPR if you want to look it up for these last two, where they gave people the same milkshake. It was 300 calories. And they told one group it was a diet milkshake that was only 150 calories. And they told the other group it was like a decadent, Dairy Queen milkshake, and it was 600 calories. And then they measured in their blood the amount of a hormone that your body releases when it tells you how full you feel. They measured that amount of that hormone in people's blood. And the people who thought they were drinking the decadent milkshake felt 3 times more full than the people who drank the diet shake. even though they were drinking the same exact amount of calories. So this really just goes to show that like perception is so important when it comes to how your nervous system responds to the things that happen physically to your body. The last study I'll just talk about briefly, they took a group of women who were hotel maids, and they, of course, they were all women. Yeah, but they took that group and they, half of them, they said, you know, we're going to just monitor your blood pressure and your weight and your body mass index and all these different things for a couple of weeks. The other group, they taught them how that job was actually like exercise, because all day long they were on their feet, they were vacuuming, they were changing beds, they were cleaning bathrooms, how many calories they were burning every day. They really changed their perception of, instead of just it's my job, they changed it to I'm getting exercise. And when they looked at the different indicators that they studied, the group that was taught that they were getting exercise, they lost more weight, their blood pressure dropped, they lost body mass index went down, all these different physical, you know, things that improvements happened. Not because they did more, they really were careful to make sure they didn't change the way they did their job. They just changed the way they thought about how they were doing their job. And so perception is everything. And perception is so important in the way we manage our stress, because it can actually save your life. So we've been taught for decades now that stress is bad, that stress will kill you, that you need to do whatever you can to reduce it. And we're all adults and we're all living through a global pandemic, and we have no control over that. So when we are told that we have to reduce our stress, and there's no way we can reduce some of these external factors in our life, it can be really disempowering. You feel like you're in a lose-lose situation. And so that message, while it was important to know, yeah, stress is something we need to be aware of and we need to manage it, to tell us that we have to reduce it or avoid it when that's not really possible is very challenging. And so what I want to, you know, really drive home is this idea that in this study for 29 years, they followed 7,000 British civil servants. They worked for the government in England, and they asked them two things. How much stress do you have in your life? And how dangerous do you perceive that stress to be? So for people who said they had a lot of stress or extreme amount of stress, they had a 50% greater chance of dying of a heart attack, or suffering a heart attack. I shouldn't say dying, although the number of people that were at risk of dying was not small. 50% greater chance of suffering a heart attack if they said that they thought that stress was harmful. So someone may say, I have a lot of stress, but I don't really think it's that bad. I mean, that it's that bad for me. They had a 50% less chance of suffering a heart attack. So it's really this idea, it's not the level of stress that you have, it's the way you perceive the stress that can actually affect your body. And so just to really, again, I wish I had more time to go into detail, but I want to make sure I give us plenty of time to practice some of the things we're going to do today. The long and the short of it is, and this is the study that proves this, when you perceive stress to be harmful, your blood vessels or your valves around your heart constrict. When you perceive stress to be beneficial to you, because it gives you more blood pumping in your body, more oxygen flowing to your brain. There are ways that stress actually benefits us, and that's why we experience it. When you perceive the stress as either beneficial or neutral, the blood vessels and the valves around your heart, they don't constrict, they stay open. And that's what the scientists now think makes the difference in terms of whether or not you suffer damage to your body from the stress. It's not the stress that's necessarily causing damage. It's the belief that you may hold about that stress that may actually be causing the damage. So this is the power of perception and the placebo effect and the ways that we look at our body and how we perceive the things that we experience. And so I would highly encourage you to watch this TED Talk if you haven't ever seen it before, How to Make Stress Your Friend. It's super helpful in reframing how to nurture your body in a way that's it doesn't require you to actually change anything. You don't necessarily have to get rid of your stress. You don't have to make any major changes to your life. You don't have to quit that stressful job necessarily. What you may need to do is just change the way that you're looking at the situation. And so you all maybe think, well, that's great. And now I might know how to better manage my stress. But what if I actually want to reduce it? Like, are there ways where we can actually reduce the stress that we experience, even if it's those external stressors that we can't change? Is there a way to be living through this time in our world history and have a less stressful experience of it? And so that's what we are going to spend the rest of our time today talking about and working on. We're going to be doing some exercises together. So I'm almost done talking at you. But I just want to emphasize, like, this is my logo for a very important reason. And it's because, we can't control the vast majority of the things that are happening in the world around us. And there are always things that are happening. And so these external things that swirl around us are going to be there. And if you can imagine like a record spinning on a turntable, there's a very big difference between, being hanging on the edge of that record. If you were shrunk down and you had to sit somewhere, if you're sitting out on the edge of that record and you're spinning around, you feel like, the world has just gone crazy. It's very different if you could work your way into the middle and sit in the center, because in the center, everything is still spinning, but you're just, you experience very little of that movement. And so being at the center of everything as the world is swirling all around you is really the way to reduce your stress. It's not that you're going to change the things that are happening around you. You're changing the way you experience them by becoming more grounded, more centered in the middle of all of that. And so the way that we're going to do this is through mindfulness. And I don't teach mindfulness in the traditional way. You may have gone through a mindfulness class before where they talk about mindfulness is, becoming aware of all the things that are happening in your body and around you, your breathing, your pain, this, that, and the other. I really like to strip it down to its most essential parts, which is the one thing I can tell, the most essential thing about mindfulness is its observation without comparison. It's no judgments. It's no assumptions, no expectations. It is observation without comparison. So when you don't compare it to anything, that means you don't have the past in there. You don't have the future. It's just the observation of what's happening right here and right now. And so when it comes to the body, mind, and spirit, mindfulness is really at the intersection of all of these, because you have the body and you're experiencing these sensations from your 5 senses. You also have your mind, which is constantly thinking and having these feelings about things. And then this awe and wonder and self-transcendence is what can happen when you start to practice mindfulness on a regular basis, especially if you can find ways that are very authentic for you and ways that integrate into your daily life. That this can allow you to be more present and more focused and more experiencing the benefits, the physical benefits that actually come from that sense of awe and wonder that you can experience. So that is what we are going to focus on for the rest of today. So I'm all done with that part, and I'm going to have to stop recording now.